My name is Alina Ward, and I was 35 years old when a bank manager called me during a 12-hour ICU shift and whispered, "I cannot give legal advice, but you need to check the beneficiary forms." I was standing in a staff stairwell at Riverton Memorial, still in Navy scrubs, with a coffee I had reheated 3 times and not finished once. My husband, Nolan, and I had opened our first joint account 1 week earlier because we were buying a house. Not a mansion. Not a dream home magazine house. Just a pale blue place with a tired porch, a maple tree in the back, and enough bedrooms for the future we kept saying we were building. I had deposited $129,000. That money came from years of nursing overtime. Nights, weekends, holiday shifts, and double shifts where my feet went numb before sunrise, and my back hurt so badly I sat in my car afterward because I did not trust myself to drive yet. I thought I was putting that money into our future. Then Claudia Mercer from Brierstone Bank lowered her voice and said, "Before you sign anything else, check the beneficiary forms." At first, I thought she meant we forgot a box. Then I saw the copies. My husband had quietly added his mother, Marjorie Ward, as transfer-on-death beneficiary on accounts tied to our house savings, our emergency fund, and rollover paperwork connected to money I had earned before the marriage. His excuse was simple. His mother was better with paperwork. His mother would help if anything happened. His mother knew how banks worked, but the forms said something colder. If I died, or if I became unable to handle my finances, Marjorie would have a path to control money I earned before Nolan ever wore a wedding ring. I did not confront him that night. I asked for copies. I met a financial advisor. I called an attorney. I changed my beneficiaries. I recorded the conversations where Nolan kept putting pens in front of me and calling the forms routine. Then Claudia told me the part that made my hands go still. Nolan's mother had tried the same thing with his first wife. The first wife never had enough paper to prove intent. This time, I did. And when Nolan and Marjorie invited me to a family financial planning meeting, expecting me to sign one more stack of forms, I walked in with the bank manager's written notes, my attorney's letter, revised account confirmations, and a signed statement from the woman they had done this to before. Marjorie had an uncapped pen waiting for me. I had my own future already moved out of her reach. Before I tell you what happened next, welcome back to Hush and Tell Stories. If you have ever trusted someone with the future you worked for, only to find their family's name hidden in the paperwork, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments what you would do if a bank manager told you to check the beneficiary forms, and subscribe if quiet truth is the kind of justice you understand. I became a nurse because I liked knowing what to do when other people panicked. That sounds colder than it is. I did not like pain. I did not like fear. I liked the moment after fear, when training moved through my hands and somebody's breathing got easier because I knew which button to press, which line to check, which doctor to call, which daughter in the hallway needed plain words instead of medical fog. Riverton, Wisconsin, was not a large city, but the hospital served 3 counties. Farmers came in with crushed hands. Grandmothers came in with pneumonia. Teenagers came in after accidents on icy roads. Men who had ignored chest pain for 2 days came in gray and sweating, trying to make jokes while their wives cried into purses. I worked ICU nights for most of my 20s. Nights change your understanding of money. Day workers talk about overtime like extra income. Night nurses know overtime is traded from the body. It comes from missed birthdays, cold cafeteria eggs at 4 a.m, compression socks peeled off sore calves, and the strange sadness of driving home while the rest of the world is drinking coffee and starting fresh. Every dollar in that account had a night shift attached to it. By 32, I had $186,000 spread across savings, a small brokerage account, and a retirement rollover from my first hospital job. It was not rich money. It was safety money. It was house money. It was the kind of money a woman builds when she knows nobody is coming with a rescue plan. Then I met Nolan. He was 37, an assistant principal at a middle school near the river. He had tired eyes and a kind face, and that patient tone educators get after years of telling children not to run in hallways. We met at a community blood drive hosted by the school district. I was volunteering at the registration table because the hospital needed nurses there, and I had accidentally said yes to one more thing. Nolan came in with a group of teachers. He joked with the N. Irvis ones, fetched orange juice, and sat beside a new math teacher who looked like she might faint before the needle touched her. He did not flirt with me right away. He asked if I needed another pen because mine kept skipping. That is how some men become dangerous, not by overwhelming you, by appearing useful. Tessa and I wanted different lives, he told me on our 5th date. I think I wanted peace. She wanted everything to be a fight. I remember that because I nodded like I understood. At the time, I did not ask what he called a fight. That was my first mistake. The second was thinking his closeness with his mother was sweetness. Marjorie Ward was a retired municipal clerk, which meant she had spent 30 years handling forms, permits, minutes, records, and the kind of paperwork that makes ordinary people feel stupid. She was proud of that. She wore silver glasses on a chain and carried a canvas folder nearly everywhere. She had a sharp gray bob, a soft voice, and a way of using the word organized like it was a moral category. She liked me at first. At least, she liked the version of me that worked long hours, brought store-bought lemon bars to Sunday dinner, and did not question why Nolan gave her copies of everything. Once, early in our engagement, I asked him why he still let his mother handle so much when he was nearly 40. He kissed my forehead, which I later learned was his favorite way to end a conversation while pretending to be affectionate. Mom catches details other people miss, he said. She is not controlling, Alina, she is careful. Careful, that word became a curtain. Behind it, Marjorie reviewed his insurance choices. Behind it, she reminded him to update his license tabs. Behind it, she kept his birth certificate in her file cabinet because he might lose it. Behind it, she knew which bank held his old joint account from his first marriage, which attorney handled his divorce, and exactly how Tessa had, according to Marjorie, made everything more complicated than it needed to be. I heard Tessa's name often enough to understand she was the cautionary tale. Marjorie never called her cruel. She was too polished for that. She called her reactive, suspicious, easily overwhelmed. The kind of woman who turned practical conversations into personal attacks. Nolan would sigh when Tessa came up. She thought every suggestion was a trap. I remember saying, maybe divorce makes people defensive. He answered, Tessa was defensive before divorce. That was the problem. I accepted that because I wanted to believe I was different. That is another trap women walk into. We hear how a man describes the woman before us, and instead of asking whether he tells the truth, we decide to prove we are easier to love. Our wedding was small. Courthouse, dinner after, 23 people total. I wore a cream dress with sleeves because it was October and cold near the river. Nolan cried during the vows. Marjorie dabbed her eyes with a folded handkerchief and told me afterward, "You are good for him. You have such a calming presence." I took that as a compliment. Later, I understood that calming presence often meant I did not challenge the family temperature. Money was separate at first. We had a shared bill account for rent and utilities, but my savings stayed mine. Nolan knew I had saved aggressively. He knew I had more than he did. He said he respected it. "I love that you built your own safety," he told me once. "It makes me feel like we are choosing each other, not rescuing each other." That sentence lowered my guard. When we decided to buy a house, I was ready. Nolan stood beside me and said, "This feels like where we start." I believed him. The down payment would mostly come from me. He had savings, but not enough. He had student loans. He had divorce debt that he said was almost gone. I did not mind contributing more because I had more. What I wanted was clarity. I told him that before the joint account. I am comfortable using part of my premarital savings for the down payment and emergency fund, but we need everything documented. He looked hurt for half a second, then nodded. "Of course, I do not want your money to feel unsafe." That was exactly the right thing to say. I wish the right thing said by the wrong person sounded different. We opened the joint account at Briarstone Bank on a Friday morning after I finished a night shift. I should not have gone sleep-deprived. Nurses know better than anyone that fatigue makes consent softer. But the closing timeline was tight. Nolan had taken the morning off, and Claudia Mercer had an opening. She congratulated us on the house. I slid the cashier's check across her desk, $129,000. Nolan squeezed my hand and said, "This is our foundation now, no more yours and mine." I smiled because I wanted that sentence to feel romantic. Claudia's eyes flicked to my face, then the check, then Nolan's hand over mine. Not dramatically, just enough that I remembered it later. We signed the account paperwork, joint account for house savings, linked emergency reserve, discussion of possible investment rollover once the house purchase settled. Claudia explained everything clearly. I appreciated that. I read documents before signing because I had spent years watching families in hospital rooms regret not reading forms until after something went wrong. Marjorie came by the bank near the end. I had not known she was coming. She appeared with her canvas folder and a smile that looked like help arriving before it was called. "I was downtown and thought I would see if you two needed anything," she said. Nolan brightened. "Perfect timing. Mom understands this stuff better than I do." Claudia's expression did not change, but something about the air did. Marjorie sat in the extra chair and listened while Claudia reviewed account access and beneficiary options. I remember Claudia saying beneficiary designations were optional on certain accounts and should be considered carefully, especially when funds came from separate sources. Marjorie nodded. "Of course, that is why families plan before emotions get involved. Families, not couples, families." I was tired, I was happy. I was thinking about paint colors and inspections and whether the upstairs radiator noise meant expensive repairs. When Claudia asked whether we wanted to complete beneficiary designations that day or review later, I said I wanted to review later. Nolan said, "That is fine." Marjorie said nothing, at least not then. The next week, forms began appearing, not all at once. That would have been obvious. First, Nolan brought home a packet from the bank and said Claudia needed a few routine updates before underwriting reviewed our funds. I said, "Claudia did not mention that." He shrugged and said, "She may have told Mom. Mom called to check." I looked up from folding towels. "Why did your mother call our bank manager?" he said, "to ask general questions." I asked, "About our account," he answered, "about the home buying process." His tone had already shifted into the one he used at school, when handling a parent who was about to become difficult. I said, "I do not want Marjorie discussing our accounts." He sighed. "She is not discussing balances, Alina. She is helping." There it was again. Helping. The word people use when they want gratitude to replace boundaries. I set the towel down. "What forms?" He handed them to me. "Transfer on death designation request. Emergency contact update. Rollover beneficiary review. Household protection checklist." I did not sign them. I said I wanted to read everything after sleeping. Nolan kissed my forehead and said, "Of course, you are exhausted." The next day, Marjorie brought a blue folder to Sunday dinner. She placed it beside my plate while dessert was still on the table. Apple cake, vanilla ice cream, beneficiary forms, that was Marjorie. She could make intrusion look like organization. "I pulled together the routine items," she said. "Nothing dramatic." I opened the folder and saw sticky tabs where signatures belonged. A tiny heat moved up my neck. Marjorie noticed. Of course she did. "Alina," she said lightly, "a wife who trusts her husband should not need a lawyer to sign household protection forms." Nolan looked at me, not shocked, expectant. That hurt more. I closed the folder. A wife who works in a hospital reads forms before signing them. His brother, Dean, laughed awkwardly. Marjorie smiled like I had made a joke she did not approve of. "Of course," she said, "read them. Just do not let fear make simple things heavy." I took the folder home. I did not sleep much that night. At 6:40 the next morning, my phone rang while I was walking from a patient's room to the medication station. It was Claudia from Briarstone. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, she called again. Bank managers do not call twice before breakfast to chat. I stepped into the staff stairwell. "Elena Ward," I answered. Claudia said, "Elena, this is Claudia Mercer at Briarstone. Is now a private moment?" The wording made my stomach tighten. "Yes," she paused. "I need to be careful. I cannot give legal advice, and I cannot discuss anything outside policy. But I am looking at beneficiary-related forms connected to your new accounts, and I strongly recommend you review them personally before signing anything else." I pressed my back to the stairwell wall. "What forms?" she said. "Transfer on death designations and related beneficiary requests." I said, "I did not submit final beneficiary forms." Claudia answered, "I understand." Those 2 words carried more than they should have. She continued, voice low, "You may request copies of all pending and submitted forms connected to your profile. I suggest you do that." I swallowed and asked, "Claudia, are you telling me something is wrong?" "I am telling you to check the Benefi. Shirai forms." A code blue alarm sounded faintly somewhere beyond the stairwell door. My body wanted to move toward it. My life needed me to stay. "I will come in after my shift," I said. Claudia answered, "Ask for me directly." I finished the shift because nurses finish shifts, unless their own blood is on the floor. At 7:30 that evening, still in scrubs, hair flattened by a surgical cap I had worn for half the day, I sat across from Claudia in her office. She had a sealed envelope ready. "I can provide copies of forms associated with accounts you own or co-own," she said. "I cannot interpret them for you beyond bank procedure. You should speak with an attorney or financial advisor." She slid the envelope across the desk. I opened it there. The first form listed the joint house savings account. Primary owner, Elena Ward. Joint owner, Nolan Ward. Transfer on death beneficiary requested, Marjorie Ward. The second form listed the linked emergency reserve account. Same beneficiary. The third was connected to a pending rollover review from my prior hospital retirement account. Not completed. Not accepted. But the request document still had Marjorie's name typed where a contingent beneficiary might go if certain funds were consolidated later. I stared at the pages. Marjorie Ward, Marjorie Ward, Marjorie Ward, 3 times. Claudia sat very still. I said, "This is my overtime money." She did not answer. I looked at the dates, all closed together, 2 after the bank meeting. One the same day Marjorie brought the blue folder to dinner. "Did Nolan submit these?" I asked. Claudia's face stayed professional. "The bank's records show multiple inquiries and document preparation requests. I can give you the account copies and note logs related to your customer file. For anything beyond that, you need counsel." My hands were cold. "Why did you call me?" Her eyes met mine. "One mistake is messy. 3 forms with the same outside beneficiary is a pattern." I folded the papers carefully. Careful hands are useful when the heart wants to tear something. "Is this legal?" I asked. "Elena, I cannot give legal advice." "I know, I am asking the wrong person." She softened slightly. "You are asking the first person, that is different." I put the copies into my nursing bag. When I finally got home, Nolan was watching television. He looked up and smiled. "You are late," I said. "I stopped for coffee." He asked, "In scrubs, you must be dead." I answered, "Close." He paused the show. "Mom said you seemed tense about the paperwork." I set my bag down slowly. "She called you." She worries when people misunderstand practical things. There was my answer. Before I asked anything, the defense had already been prepared. I said, "What practical thing did I misunderstand?" He gave a small laugh and said, "Do we have to do this tonight?" No, that surprised him. I picked up my bag, "Not tonight," then I went upstairs. I did not confront him because I did not yet know how deep the paperwork went. Nurses learn not to pull out a line before knowing what it is attached to. The next morning, I called a financial advisor named Priya Dalton, recommended by a surgeon I trusted because his divorce had taught him the gospel of documentation. Priya's office was above a pharmacy, and her conference room smelled faintly like toner and peppermint. She listened. She did not gasp, "I like that." I handed her the forms, the deposit receipt, and the account opening packet. She drew 3 boxes on a yellow legal pad: house savings, emergency fund, premarital rollover. Then she drew arrows. Transfer on death designations can move assets outside probate depending on account type and state rules, she said. They can be useful. They can also be dangerous when people treat them like harmless emergency contacts. They told me it was protection. Protection for whom? That question sat between us. Priya tapped the page. You need an attorney, today if possible. You also need to separate what is clearly premarital, document what was contributed to the joint account, and stop signing anything presented through your husband or his mother. I already stopped. Good, now replace vulnerable structures with clear ones. Do not argue with a form, replace it. Gwen explained that I should not panic, but I should act. Acting and panicking are different. One protects, the other announces. She drafted a plan. Request complete copies from the bank. Freeze any pending beneficiary changes until reviewed. Move clearly premarital rollover assets away from joint discussions. Keep only mutually intended house funds in joint structure. Update my own beneficiaries to people I chose. Preserve communications. Do not sign documents from Marjorie. Do not let Nolan frame legal review as mistrust. He already has, I said. Gwen looked at me over the forms, then expect escalation. She was right. At dinner that night, Nolan placed a pen B. Essayed my plate, not a folder, a pen, somehow that was worse. He said, Mom thinks we should finish the bank forms before the seller starts asking for proof of funds again. I looked at the pen. What forms? The beneficiary cleanup, routine things. I took a sip of water. I want Gwen to review them. He blinked. Who is Gwen? My attorney. The room changed. It was just our kitchen, but the air tightened like Marjorie herself had entered. Nolan smiled without warmth. Attorney, Elena, come on. I am not signing bank forms without independent review. Independent from your husband. Independent from your mother. His face hardened. You make everything sound sinister. No, the forms do that. He pushed back from the table. Mom is better with paperwork. If something happens to you, she can move faster than lawyers. Why are you making protection sound like theft? My phone was on the counter, recording. Wisconsin is a one-party consent state, Gwen had told me. But she also told me recordings should be used carefully, not as toys. I was not playing. I was preserving. I looked at him and kept my voice even. If something happens to me, why should your mother control money I earned before I married you? He stood because she would help me. There it was, not help us, not protect my wishes, help him. I let the silence hold it. He heard it too, because he started talking faster. I mean help the household, help with bills, help with the house. You work in a hospital, Elena, you know things happen. Why are you acting like planning is betrayal? I said, because planning usually starts with asking the person whose money it is. He left the kitchen. The recording captured his chair scraping the floor. At the bank, Claudia gave me additional note logs tied to my customer file. Nothing improper, nothing dramatic. Dates, times, inquiries, requests for beneficiary paperwork. A note that customer requested employee Elena Ward review before changes were completed. A note that third-party family member asked general procedural questions and was not provided account-specific information. Claudia chose each word like it had to survive a storm. When I thanked her, she closed the office door. Elena, she said, there is something else. I sat very still. I cannot disclose private records. I will not. But I can tell you that you are not the first woman to sit in this office frightened by beneficiary pressure connected to that family. My mouth went dry. Tessa, I said. Claudia's eyes did not confirm the name directly. She did not have to. The first wife knew something was wrong, she said. She just did not have enough paper before they made her look unstable. I stared at her. What happened? I cannot tell you her banking history. I can tell you to document everything and speak through your attorney. Did Marjorie do this? Claudia folded her hands on the desk. I can tell you that patterns matter. I walked out of the bank with my copy packet pressed against my ribs like it was something living. Gwen contacted Tessa through proper channels. I did not call her myself. I did not want to ambush a woman I had once silently judged because my husband and his mother taught me what to think about her. Tessa responded 3 days later. She agreed to speak with Gwen first, then me. We met in Gwen's office on a rainy Friday afternoon. Tessa Rowe was 40, with short dark hair, clear eyes, and the tired composure of a woman who had survived being called crazy by people who needed her quiet. She looked at me for a long moment before sitting. "You are less smug than I expected," she said. I almost laughed because I deserved that. "I am sorry," I said. "For what? For believing them?" She nodded once. That is a start. Gwen kept the meeting focused. Tessa explained that during her marriage to Nolan, Marjorie had pushed to be listed as emergency beneficiary on savings accounts Tessa had inherited from an aunt. It was framed as temporary, practical, helpful. Nolan said Marjorie would know what to do if Tessa became unavailable. When Tessa refused, Marjorie told family members Tessa was unstable and secretive with money. Nolan said Tessa's resistance proved she did not trust the marriage. Tessa had not saved enough. A few texts, one form, no recordings. By the time she understood the pattern, the divorce had become about her alleged paranoia. I started to sound frantic because nobody would admit the simple thing, she said. They wanted access to money that was not theirs. I looked down at my hands. Tessa slid a signed statement across Gwen's desk. On a sticky note, she had written, "Do not let them do it again." I read the statement twice. Marjorie called it protection until I refused. Then she called it proof I was unstable. That sentence felt like a door opening in a locked room. After the meeting, Tessa stood beside me near the elevator. "Nolan is not stupid," she said. "People underestimate him because Marjorie is louder." I looked at her. "He lets her make the first move," Tessa continued. "Then he decides whether your reaction can be used against you." That sentence stayed with me. I went home and changed every plan. With Priya, I moved the premarital rollover discussion away from any joint consolidation. I updated beneficiaries to my sister, Lee, and a simple trust structure Gwen prepared. I left only the mutually intended house funds in the joint account, and even those were documented by source. I requested written confirmation of no transfer-on-death beneficiary on the house savings without my direct authorization. I paused the home purchase contingency, while Gwen reviewed whether the funds had been compromised by the attempted designations. I did not hide money. I put my own name back where it belonged. 3 confirmation emails arrived on a Wednesday afternoon while I sat in my car outside Briarstone Bank. Revised beneficiary confirmation. Transfer on death request withdrawn. Premarital rollover retained separately. I read each one slowly. Then I cried, not loudly, not for long, but enough to understand how frightened I had been. Nolan noticed the shift before he knew what caused it. "You seem distant," he said that night. "I am thinking." "About the house?" "Yes," he sat beside me on the couch. "Mom thinks we should meet with Dean's financial planner, not because anything is wrong, just to get everyone aligned before closing." "Everyone? You, me, Mom, maybe Dean. It is family planning." Family planning. The phrase almost made me laugh. "When?" I asked. "Sunday afternoon, at your mother's house." He hesitated. "It is easiest." Of course it was. Marjorie called the next morning to confirm. Her voice was sweet, warm, and organized. "Elena, I think we have all let paperwork become heavier than necessary. Dean's planner can walk everyone through the forms in plain language. No pressure, just clarity." No pressure. People who say no pressure while arranging a meeting around your signature are rarely telling the truth. I said, I will be there. Wonderful, she said. Bring any forms you still have. I will. I brought more than forms. Gwen came with me. That was not what they expected. Marjorie opened her front door wearing a navy cardigan and the expression of a woman who had rehearsed graciousness, but not this scene. Nolan stood behind her, face tightening when he saw Gwen's leather folder. Dean was in the living room with his wife, Claire, and a financial planner named Russell Pike, who looked uncomfortable before anyone spoke. A stack of forms sat on the coffee table. An uncapped pen lay on top. It was almost beautiful how certain they were that the pen would matter. Marjorie recovered first. Elena, I thought this was a family discussion. It is, I said. That is why my attorney is here. Nolan said my name in a low voice. Not angry yet. Warning, I ignored it. Gwen introduced herself. She did not sit until I did. That small courtesy steadied me. Russell cleared his throat. I was asked to review household planning options. Gwen looked at him. Were you provided the source of funds documentation for the assets in question? He blinked. I was told this concerned marital house funds and estate planning. That is incomplete. Marjorie smiled tightly. We are not here for accusations. No, I said. You brought me here to sign control away. I came here to show it was already protected. The room went quiet. I placed the bank forms on the coffee table first. Not thrown, placed. Then the copy packet. Claudia's written notes. The deposit receipt for $129,000. The unsigned routine forms Marjorie had given me. The revised account confirmations. Gwen's attorney letter. Tessa's signed statement. Nolan stared at the statement like it might bite him. Marjorie saw Tessa's name and lost color in her face. Good, not because I wanted cruelty. Because recognition is useful when people pretend surprise. Gwen began with the attorney letter. She stated that I would not sign any beneficiary, transfer on death, rollover, or household protection document presented through Nolan, Marjorie, or any family advisor. She stated that my premarital funds had been documented and separated. She stated that any attempt to submit beneficiary changes using incomplete information would be treated as a serious legal matter. Nolan said, "This is insane." Gwen looked at him. That is not a legal argument. Dean shifted in his chair. Claire looked at me with an expression I could not read. Maybe sympathy, maybe fear that her own paperwork needed checking. Marjorie folded her hands. Elena, you are being influenced by people who do not understand our family. I looked at her. I understand enough. No, you do not. If something happened to you, Nolan would be devastated. I was trying to make sure the household would be protected. By naming yourself beneficiary on money I earned before I married him. That is a crude way to phrase it. It is a precise way. Her eyes hardened. There she was, not the careful clerk, not the helpful mother, the woman behind the folder. Gwen handed Russell a copy of the beneficiary forms. He read them, and his posture changed. Professional discomfort became professional distance. I was not aware these designations had been requested, he said. Marjorie snapped, they were drafts. Then why, I asked, was my husband pressuring me to sign them after I said I wanted legal review? Nolan leaned forward. Because you turned a normal process into a courtroom. I opened my phone. He stopped, I pressed play. His voice filled the room, clear from the recording on the laundry shelf. If something happens to you, Mom can move faster than lawyers. Why are you making protection sound like theft? Nobody moved. Then my voice on the recording asked, if something happens to me, why should your mother control money I earned before I married you? Nolan's recorded answer came next, because she would help me. I stopped the audio. The silence afterward was not empty, it was full. Dean looked at Nolan. You said that. Nolan's mouth opened, closed. Marjorie said he misspoke. I turned to her. No, he clarified. Gwen placed Tessa's statement on top of the stack. And this, she said, is a signed statement from Nolan's first wife, describing a similar pattern of pressure involving Marjorie Ward as emergency beneficiary on funds that did not belong to her or Nolan. Marjorie stood, "That woman is vindictive." "Tessa wrote one sentence I want everyone to hear," I said. "I read it myself. Marjorie called it protection until I refused. Then she called it proof I was unstable." Nolan looked away. That hurt more than if he had argued. Looking away meant he remembered. Claire whispered, "Oh my God." Marjorie pointed at me. "You contacted his ex-wife." "My attorney contacted a witness." "She is not a witness. She is a bitter woman who destroyed my son's first marriage." I looked at Nolan. "Is that what happened?" He did not answer. The room did. Marjorie's voice sharpened. "I was protecting my son's household." "No," I said. "You were preparing to inherit my labor." The sentence landed exactly where it needed to. Nolan stood then. "Enough." I looked up at him. He was red-faced, embarrassed, angry in the way men become angry when humiliation arrives wearing their own signature. "You do not get to drag my mother through this because you are scared of commitment," he said. I almost smiled. There it was. The old Tessa script held out for me. Scared, paranoid, unstable, complicated. I stood too. I deposited $129,000 from my premarital savings into a joint account because I believed we were buying a home together. Your mother's name appeared on beneficiary forms tied to that money. You pressured me to sign more forms after I asked for legal review. The bank manager documented concerns. Your first wife described the same pattern. I am not scared of commitment, Nolan. I am refusing a trap. His face changed, because that sentence could not be softened into emotion. Russell gathered his papers. I do not think I can participate in this meeting further without reviewing accurate source documentation and legal context. Marjorie turned on him. You are supposed to explain forms. He stood. I believe the forms have been explained. Then he left. Dean stood next. Nolan, did you know Mom's name was on those forms? Nolan said nothing. Dean turned to Marjorie. Did you? She looked insulted. I knew what was necessary. Claire stood up so quickly her purse fell from her lap. She picked it up with shaking hands. Dean, we are checking our beneficiaries tonight. That was the first moment I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because truth has a way of becoming contagious once one person stops whispering. Marjorie sat down again. Her hands were trembling, but her voice stayed cold. You have ruined this family. I looked at her. No, I have interrupted a method. Nolan stared at me like he did not know whether to hate me or fear me. Maybe both. Gwen closed her folder. Elena's premarital funds have been separated. No transfer on death designation names Marjorie Ward. No rollover assets will be consolidated into accounts accessible by Nolan Ward or Marjorie Ward. The house purchase is paused pending further legal review. Nolan's voice dropped. You killed the house. I looked at him for a long moment. No, you made the house unsafe before we ever got keys. He flinched. That one reached him. I picked up my copies. Gwen picked up hers. I left the uncapped pen on the table. Outside, the air was cold enough to hurt my lungs. Gwen walked beside me to the car and said, You did well. I feel sick. That is normal, bodies do. Not know the difference between exposure and danger right away. I looked back at Marjorie's house. Through the window, I could see Nolan standing in the living room while his mother sat rigid on the couch, not speaking. I wondered whether he would blame her, me, Tessa, Claudia, the bank, the forms, the timing, the tone, anyone but himself. Then I realized I did not need to know. That was new. Nolan came home that night, but only to pack a bag. He said he needed space. I said space was appropriate. He said I had embarrassed him in front of his family. I said his family had been overrepresented in my finances. He said I sounded like Gwen. I said he should be grateful one of us did. He slept at Marjorie's house. I changed the garage code. The next morning, I paused the house purchase formally. Our realtor was disappointed. then concerned when I said there were legal issues with funds. The seller moved on to a backup offer. I thought losing the house would break me harder than it did. But when the cancellation became final, I felt sadness, yes, and then a strange relief. The pale blue house had been beautiful. It had also become the place where my money almost changed hands with Marjorie's name waiting in the walls. I let it go. Claudia called once after receiving a copy of Gwen's letter. "You did the right thing," she said. "Did I? Yes, but I know that does not make it painless." I sat in my car outside the hospital, watching employees move in and out under the awning. "Thank you for calling me." She was quiet for a moment. Banking is full of rules. Sometimes humanity has to move carefully inside them. That was all she said. It was enough. Tessa emailed me through Gwen 2 weeks later. Not a long message. "I am sorry you had to learn them this way. I am glad you had paper. Build something that does not require their permission." I printed it, not for court, for me. Nolan tried counseling. I went once because Gwen said listening could clarify whether reconciliation was even emotionally possible. The therapist had a soft voice and a basket of smooth stones on the table. Nolan held one the entire session, rubbing his thumb over it like he could erase what happened. He said, "I wanted my mother involved because I trust her." I answered, "You trusted her with access to money I earned before you knew me." He said, "I thought if something happened, she would help me handle everything." I said, "That sentence is the problem. You were planning for my absence with your mother, not planning with me." The therapist asked Nolan what he feared would happen if Marjorie did not have control. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I was afraid I would not know what to do." I believed him. That was the painful part. His fear was real. But real fear can still become theft when it reaches for someone else's life without permission. I said, "You could have said that." He cried then. I did not comfort him. I did not punish him either. I simply sat there and let his feelings belong to him. That is harder than it sounds when you have spent a marriage smoothing every edge before it cuts anyone. The separation began quietly, not with slammed doors, not with screaming, with account statements, attorney letters, separate mailing addresses, and a list of household items neither of us cared enough to fight over. Nolan wanted the dining table. I let him have it. I had never liked it. Marjorie had chosen it. I kept my grandmother's quilt, my nursing textbooks, the gray Corolla, and every dollar Gwen and Priya helped me protect. Some people said I was lucky I found out before closing. They were right. But lucky is a complicated word when it arrives after betrayal. Luck did not work nights for that money. Luck did not refuse to sign. Luck did not record conversations with shaking hands. Luck did not sit across from the first wife and say, "I am sorry I believed them." I was helped, I was warned, I was prepared. I was not lucky instead of careful. I was careful enough to use the warning. In spring, I opened a new account at Briarstone, not joint, mine. Claudia handled it herself. We did not talk about Nolan much. We did not need to. She reviewed the beneficiaries slowly, line by line, my sister Lee. Then a small trust Gwen prepared. No Marjorie, no Nolan, no soft language about emergency help hiding inside ownership. When Claudia printed the confirmation, she slid it across the desk. "Check it," she said. I smiled for the first time in that bank since the warning call. I will always check it now. Afterward, I bought a plain envelope from the drugstore and wrote on it in black ink. House fund, mine. I put the new bank card inside. That afternoon, I went to work in clean scrubs. ICU was busy. It always was. A man recovering from surgery squeezed my hand when I adjusted his pillow. A daughter asked me if her father was going to be okay, and I told her the truth as gently as I could. At 3 in TH. Morning, I ate pretzels at the nurse's station and realized I felt tired but not hunted. That mattered. I did not stop wanting a home. I stopped wanting one badly enough to confuse a trap with a foundation. Months later, I drove past the pale blue house on Alder Lane. Someone else had bought it. They had painted the porch railings white and hung a swing under the maple tree. For a second, grief rose in me so suddenly I had to pull over 2 blocks away. I let myself cry. Not for Nolan, not exactly. For the woman who had stood under that maple tree and seen a future. She had not been stupid. She had been hopeful. Hope deserves compassion too. Then I drove to my apartment above the bakery, climbed the stairs, and opened the window to let in the smell of bread. My life was smaller than the one I had imagined. It was also mine. Before you go, tell me this. If you found your mother-in-law's name hidden on beneficiary forms tied to money you earned before marriage, would you confront them first or quietly protect yourself first? And tell me your name and the city you are watching from. I want to know where this story found you.